I'm Charlotte, and at 52 years old, I thought I understood heartbreak. I'd buried my husband when my daughter was just 8. I'd worked 2 jobs to put her through college, but nothing prepared me for the phone call I received 3 weeks before, what should have been the happiest day of both our lives. When my own daughter told me not to come to her wedding, just watch the live stream, my world crumbled. But she never expected what I would do next in front of all her guests. Before I dive into this story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Hit that like button if you're ready for a journey that will change how you think about family loyalty. Don't forget to subscribe, because stories like this need to be heard. Now let me take you back to where this all began. 26 years ago, I held my newborn daughter Layla for the first time and promised her everything I had. When her father died in a car accident 8 years later, that promise became my entire world. I remember sitting in our tiny apartment that first night as a widow, watching 8-year-old Layla sleep, wondering how I'd ever be enough for her. But we made it work. Every morning started with pancakes shaped like hearts before school. Every scraped knee got a kiss and a colorful bandage. Every bedtime story was told with different voices for each character. When other kids had 2 parents at school plays, Layla had me cheering loud enough for 3 people. The teenage years brought their challenges. Layla wanted name-brand clothes I couldn't afford, so we learned to hunt for treasures at thrift stores. She wanted a car for her 16th birthday, so I taught her to drive in my old Honda with the dented bumper. Every Sunday, we'd explore a new part of town, sharing dreams over coffee and donuts from whatever local shop we discovered. College acceptance letters arrived like golden tickets. Layla got into State University with a partial scholarship, but tuition still meant I'd work double shifts at the diner and take on weekend bookkeeping jobs. Some nights, I'd fall asleep over account books, my fingers stained with ink and my feet aching from 12-hour shifts. But seeing Layla walk across that graduation stage, diploma in hand, made every sacrifice worth it. 3 years ago, she met Marcus at her marketing job. He seemed nice enough, polite, and well-educated. When Layla brought him home for dinner, I cooked her favorite meatloaf and set out my grandmother's good china. Marcus complimented everything, asked thoughtful questions about my work, and helped clear the table. Layla glowed with happiness, and that was enough for me. When they announced their engagement last Christmas, I cried happy tears. Layla showed me the ring, a stunning diamond that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. We hugged and laughed, and she asked if I'd help with wedding planning. Of course I said yes. This was my baby girl's dream coming true. But somewhere in those early months of planning, something shifted. Phone calls became shorter. Weekend visits became less frequent. When I'd ask about dress shopping or venue visits, Layla would give vague answers about still figuring things out. I told myself she was just busy with work and stressed about planning. I had no idea what was really happening behind the scenes. The first crack in my understanding came at dinner with Marcus's parents 6 months before the wedding. Eleanor and Richard Whitmore lived in a neighborhood where houses had circular driveways and manicured lawns. Their dining room could have housed my entire apartment, complete with crystal chandelier and oil paintings of ancestors I assumed weren't theirs. Eleanor greeted me with the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. She complimented my dress, a navy blue number I'd bought specifically for the occasion, but somehow made it sound like she was surprised I owned anything appropriate. Throughout dinner, she'd correct my grammar in subtle ways, repeating my words back with proper pronunciation. When I mentioned working at Murphy's Diner, Eleanor asked if I planned to continue waitressing after becoming a grandmother. The question stung because it implied my work was somehow temporary or insufficient. I explained that I also did bookkeeping for several small businesses, but she'd already moved on to discussing Marcus's promotion at his father's law firm. Layla sat quietly through most of the evening, occasionally shooting me apologetic glances. When I told a story about her childhood talent show performance, she laughed but seemed embarrassed. Marcus tried to bridge conversations, but I could sense the invisible divide growing wider with each passing course. Driving home that night, I asked Layla how she thought dinner went. She was quiet for several blocks before saying, Eleanor just needed time to warm up. But something in her tone suggested she was trying to convince herself as much as me. Over the following months, I noticed changes in my daughter. Her vocabulary shifted, peppered with words like appropriate and refined. Her clothes became more expensive, her hairstyle more formal. When I'd suggest wedding ideas like the community center, where she'd had her sweet 16 party, she'd shake her head and mention Marcus's family expectations. The exclusions started small. Wedding planning meetings happened without me. Dress shopping became a girls' trip with Marcus's female relatives. When I offered to contribute financially, Layla assured me everything was handled, but her tone suggested my money wouldn't be welcome anyway. The bridal shower invitation never came. I only learned about it when my neighbor showed me photos from Layla's Facebook page. 20 women in elegant dresses toasting my daughter in someone's beautifully appointed living room. I recognized Marcus's sister and cousins, his mother presiding over gift opening like a queen, but no mother of the bride in sight. When I called Layla that evening, she apologized profusely. The shower had been planned last minute, she claimed. Only Marcus's side of the family, she explained. But her voice carried a defensiveness that suggested she knew how much it hurt. I began to understand that I wasn't just being excluded from wedding events. I was being erased from my daughter's new life. The realization felt like drowning in slow motion, each incident, another weight pulling me under. 3 weeks before the wedding, I was folding laundry in my small living room when my phone rang. Layla's name appeared on the screen, and my heart lifted with hope. Maybe she was calling to invite me dress shopping or ask for help with last-minute details. Instead, her voice carried an unfamiliar nervousness as she asked how I was doing. We made small talk about work and weather before she cleared her throat and said she needed to discuss something important about the wedding. My hands stilled on the towel I was folding. "What is it, sweetheart?" "Well, Mom, we've been talking, Marcus and I, and we've decided to keep the wedding really small and intimate." Her words came out in a rush like she'd practiced them. "Just immediate family and closest friends." I felt confusion before understanding. "Okay, how small are we talking?" "About 75 people," she said, and my confusion deepened. 75 didn't sound particularly intimate. "That sounds lovely, honey. Do you need help with anything?" The silence stretched so long I wondered if we'd been disconnected. Then Layla spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, we've decided it would be better if you watch the ceremony online. We're doing a live stream so you can see everything. It'll be like being there." The towel slipped from my hands as her words registered. My daughter was uninviting me from her own wedding. The room seemed to tilt, and I gripped the arm of my chair to steady myself. "I don't understand." My voice sounded strange, like it was coming from someone else. "Layla, I'm your mother." "I know, Mom, and that's why we want you to be able to see everything clearly. The live stream will have better views than some of the seats." She was talking faster now, as if speed could somehow soften the blow. "And you won't have to worry about what to wear or anything like that." "What to wear?" The phrase came out sharper than I intended. "Layla, are you embarrassed by me?" "No, Mom, it's not that. It's just, Marcus's family has certain expectations, and we want everything to go perfectly." Expectations. The word hung between us like a blade. I thought about Eleanor's subtle corrections, the excluded shower, the gradual erasure of my presence from my daughter's life. "So, I'm not good enough for your perfect day." "Mom, please don't make this harder than it already is." Layla's voice cracked, and for a moment she sounded like the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. "You can still be part of everything. You'll see the whole ceremony." From my living room, alone. "Mom." 26 years, Layla. 26 years I've given you everything I had. I worked myself to exhaustion to pay for your education. I celebrated every milestone, dried, every tear cheered at every achievement. And now you're telling me I'm not suitable for your wedding day. The silence that followed felt like falling into a well. When Layla finally spoke, her words cut deeper than any physical wound could have. Mom, you just don't fit with our vision. The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone in disbelief. I sat in my chair as darkness fell outside, replaying every moment of Layla's childhood, wondering where I'd failed so completely that my own daughter could discard me so easily. That night, I didn't sleep. I walked through my apartment looking at photographs of Layla and me. Birthday parties in this same living room. Graduation day hugs. Mother-daughter trips to the lake. Had I imagined the love in those moments? Had I been fooling myself about our bond all these years? The first few days after Layla's call passed in a blur of numbness. I called in sick to work something I hadn't done in years. Food lost all taste. Sleep came in fragments filled with dreams of wedding days where I stood outside looking through windows. On the fourth day, my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, knocked on my door with a casserole and a knowing look. She'd heard me crying through the thin walls and came to check on me. When I finally told her what happened, she nodded with sad understanding. My daughter did something similar 30 years ago, she said quietly. Married into money and decided her factory worker mother didn't measure up. Took years for her to realize what she'd thrown away. Mrs. Peterson's story planted a seed of something stronger than self-pity. That evening, I created a fake Facebook account under a generic name and began researching. I found the wedding venue an exclusive country club with manicured gardens and a ballroom that probably cost more than my annual salary. I studied photos of past events there, noting the layout and the typical flow of ceremonies. The guest list was discoverable through various social media posts. Marcus's law firm colleagues, college friends with hyphenated last names, family members whose profiles showcased vacation homes and charity galas. 75 people who belonged to a world I'd never been invited to join. But I'd raised the bride. For 26 years, I'd been the most important person in Layla's life. I'd earned the right to be at her wedding, and if she wouldn't invite me, I'd invite myself. The plan that formed wasn't about revenge or causing a scene. It was about dignity and recognition. I'd spent my entire adult life being invisible to people who mattered to Layla's new world. For one afternoon, they were going to see me. I withdrew money from my modest savings account funds I'd been setting aside for a newer car. Instead, I bought an elegant dress from a department store downtown, something navy blue and sophisticated that Eleanor Whitmore couldn't criticize. I purchased a small portable microphone and speaker system, the kind used by tour guides. At a local print shop, I had photographs scanned and printed professional quality images from Layla's childhood through college graduation. Pictures of bedtime stories and birthday parties, report cards, and piano recitals, all the moments that shaped the woman everyone would be celebrating. I practiced my speech in my living room mirror until I could deliver it without breaking down. This wasn't about embarrassing anyone or ruining their special day. It was about claiming my place in the story of my daughter's life. The night before the wedding, I laid out my outfit and checked my supplies. My hands shook slightly as I practiced operating the microphone, but my resolve never wavered. Tomorrow, I would be seen and heard. Tomorrow, I would be the mother of the bride, invited or not. Saturday morning arrived gray and overcast, matching my emotional state perfectly. I drove to the country club 2 hours before the ceremony, parking across the street where I could observe without being noticed. My laptop sat open on the passenger seat, streaming the wedding preparations I should have been part of. Through the screen, I watched Layla in her bridal suite, surrounded by Marcus's female relatives. She looked beautiful in a dress I'd never seen before. Her hair styled in an elegant updo I'd never been asked to approve. Eleanor fussed over last-minute details while other women offered champagne toasts and took selfies. For a moment, watching my daughter's happiness, I almost lost my nerve. Maybe I should just go home and watch from my living room as instructed. Maybe love meant stepping aside and letting her have her perfect day without complications. But then I remembered 26 years of bedtime stories, homework help, and scraped knee bandages. I remembered working double shifts to pay for her education and celebrating every achievement as if it were my own. I'd earned the right to witness this milestone, and no one had the authority to take that from me. The ceremony itself was beautiful, conducted in the club's garden pavilion, with white roses and flowing fabric creating a fairy tale atmosphere. I watched from my car as guests took their seats, recognizing faces from social media posts. Marcus looked handsome in his tuxedo, his family beaming with pride in the front row. When Layla walked down the aisle on Richard's arm, since she'd decided her own father's death somehow disqualified him from the honor, my heart broke and swelled simultaneously. She was radiant, every inch the perfect bride, and for those few minutes, I forgot about everything except my love for her. The ceremony concluded with cheers and rice throwing, and guests began moving toward the reception area. This was my moment. I gathered my materials, checked my appearance one final time, and crossed the street toward my daughter's wedding. The catering entrance was busy with staff carrying supplies, and I slipped inside without question. My navy dress and confident posture suggested I belonged, and no one challenged my presence. I made my way through service corridors until I found the ballroom where cocktail hour was underway. The room was everything I'd expected from the photos, crystal chandeliers, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking perfectly manicured grounds. Round tables with white linens and towering centerpieces surrounded a dance floor where a jazz quartet played softly. Guests mingled with champagne glasses, their conversations a refined murmur punctuated by polite laughter. I found an inconspicuous corner where I could set up my portable speaker system without immediate notice. The microphone clipped easily to my dress collar, and I arranged my photographs on a nearby chair. My hands trembled slightly, but my voice remained steady as I tested the equipment volume. The moment came during a natural lull in conversation when the quartet finished a song and guests paused between toasts. I took a deep breath, activated my microphone, and stepped into the center of the room. Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Charlotte, the mother of your beautiful bride. The room fell silent, except for the soft clink of someone setting down a champagne glass. All eyes turned toward me, some curious, others confused, a few openly hostile. Eleanor's face went pale, and Marcus looked between me and the exit as if calculating distances, but I'd come too far to stop now. The silence in the ballroom felt heavy as 75 pairs of eyes focused on me. I could see Layla near the head table, her face cycling through shock, embarrassment, and something that might have been relief. Marcus stood frozen beside her, his champagne glass halfway to his lips. I know I wasn't invited to share this special day with my daughter. I continued, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system. But I've been part of Layla's story for 26 years, and I have some things I'd like to share about the remarkable woman you're all here to celebrate. Eleanor stepped forward as if to intervene, but Richard placed a restraining hand on her arm. Several guests looked uncomfortable, but others seemed curious about what I might say next. I reached for my first photograph, a picture of 3-year-old Layla on her first day of preschool. This is Layla on her first day of school. She was so nervous about leaving home that she insisted on bringing her stuffed elephant, Mr. Peanuts. I told her teacher that if Layla needed comfort, Mr. Peanuts would be in her backpack. By lunchtime, half the class was borrowing Mr. Peanuts for hugs. A few people smiled at the image, and I saw Marcus's grandmother lean forward with interest. Encouraged, I moved to the next photo. Here's Layla at age 7 after losing her first tooth. She was convinced the tooth fairy wouldn't find her because we lived in an apartment instead of a house with a yard. So she drew a map from the front door to her bedroom and left detailed instructions on her pillow. The tooth fairy left an extra $1 for being so thoughtful. More smiles appeared around the room. Even some of Marcus's law firm colleagues seemed charmed by the story. I could see my daughter's posture softening slightly, though she remained visibly torn between embarrassment and nostalgia. This photograph shows Layla's 8th grade science fair project. She built a working volcano that erupted on command. We spent weeks gathering materials from around our neighborhood, and she practiced her presentation until she could recite it perfectly. When she won first place, she hugged that trophy all the way home. I paused, looking directly at Layla across the room. Her father should have been there to see that victory. He would have been so proud. But life doesn't always give us the parents we deserve at the moments we need them most. Sometimes we have to make do with the parent we have doing the best they can with what they've got. The comment hung in the air, and I saw several guests glance between Layla and me with new understanding. Eleanor's face had flushed red, but she remained silent. Here's Layla at 16, the night she got her driver's license. She was so excited to drive herself to school that she woke up at 5 a.m. and sat in the car practicing mirror adjustments. By the time I came outside with coffee, she'd reorganized the entire glove compartment. Gentle laughter rippled through the crowd. Marcus himself smiled at this story, and I caught him looking at Layla with soft affection. This is graduation day at State University. Layla earned her degree in marketing with a 3.8 GPA while working part-time at the campus bookstore. She paid for her own textbooks and never missed a single class. When they called her name at graduation, I cheered so loudly that the people 5 rows away turned to look. I wasn't embarrassed. I was the proudest mother in that auditorium. I set down the photograph and looked around the room, making eye contact with as many guests as possible. I've worked 2 jobs for most of Layla's life. I waited tables at Murphy's Diner and kept books for small businesses. My hands aren't soft like some of yours, and my clothes come from department stores rather than boutiques. But every callus on these hands and every early morning shift was an investment in the woman you see before you today. The room had grown completely quiet, except for my voice. Even the catering staff had stopped moving, listening from doorways and service areas. Layla learned determination from watching me work double shifts to pay her tuition. She learned compassion from seeing me help neighbors during difficult times. She learned strength from watching me raise her alone after her father died. These aren't lessons you learn in finishing school or debutante training. These are lessons you learn from life, and they're worth more than any inheritance or trust fund. I could see the impact of my words rippling through the crowd like stones thrown into still water. Some guests nodded appreciatively, while others shifted uncomfortably in their formal wear. But my focus remained on Layla, whose expression had transformed from embarrassment to something approaching recognition. "Mom, stop!" Layla's voice cut through the silence as she stepped away from Marcus and moved toward me. "Just stop talking." The room held its collective breath as mother and daughter faced each other in the center of the dance floor. Layla's wedding dress rustled with each step, and her carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the tears beginning to form. "You're embarrassing yourself," she continued, but her voice lacked conviction. "This isn't appropriate." "Appropriate?" I repeated the word slowly, letting it hang between us. "That seems to be everyone's favorite word lately. Tell me, Layla, what exactly is appropriate about excluding your mother from your wedding day?" "You don't understand the situation." "I understand perfectly. I understand that you're ashamed of where you came from. I understand that Eleanor convinced you I wasn't good enough for your new life. I understand that you chose their approval over 26 years of love and sacrifice." Murmurs began among the guests, some defending me, others expressing disapproval of the public confrontation. Eleanor stepped forward again, her voice sharp with authority. "This is completely inappropriate. Someone call security." But Marcus's grandfather, a distinguished man in his 80s, spoke up from his wheelchair near the head table. "Let her finish, Eleanor. The woman has something to say." His intervention surprised everyone, including Eleanor, who had clearly expected universal support for removing me. The old man's eyes twinkled with what looked like approval as he nodded for me to continue. I didn't come here to ruin your day, Layla. I came here to claim my place in it. I've been your mother since the day you were born, and I'll be your mother until the day I die. No amount of money or social status can change that fact. But you don't fit, Layla began, then stopped, perhaps hearing how the words sounded spoken aloud. I don't fit your new image, I corrected. The image Eleanor helped you create, but fitting in isn't the same as belonging. I belong in your life because I helped create the person everyone is celebrating today. Marcus stepped closer to his new wife, and I could see him processing everything I'd said. His expression suggested he was seeing both Layla and me in a new light. Mrs. Peterson next door raised 5 children while working in a factory, I continued. She never went to college or learned proper wine etiquette, but when her children needed her, she was there. When they succeeded, she celebrated. When they failed, she helped them get back up. That's what mothers do, regardless of their bank account or social connections. Eleanor made another attempt to intervene. This is hardly the time or place for family drama. But her comment backfired spectacularly. Several guests turned toward her with disapproving looks, and Marcus's grandfather shook his head in disgust. Family drama? I asked, looking directly at Eleanor. Is that what you call a mother's love? Is that how you define 26 years of devotion and sacrifice? The old man spoke up again, his voice carrying the authority of age and experience. Eleanor, in 60 years of marriage, I've learned that you can judge a person's character by how they treat the people who serve them when they had nothing to offer in return. This woman raised Marcus's wife with love and dedication. She deserves our respect, not our contempt. His words shifted the entire dynamic in the room. Several other guests nodded in agreement, and I could see Eleanor's influence beginning to crumble under the weight of public opinion. But my focus remained on Layla, whose internal struggle was visible in every line of her face. I gave you everything I had, I said quietly, my voice barely audible without the microphone. I'm not asking for anything in return except recognition of what we shared. You can choose your new family over your old one, but you can't rewrite history. I was there for every step of your journey, whether I fit your current vision or not. The silence that followed felt eternal. Layla stood frozen between her wedding party and me, her internal conflict playing out across her features. Tears streamed down her cheeks, creating tracks through her carefully applied makeup. You're right, she whispered so softly that guests strained to hear. You're absolutely right, and I'm sorry. The admission seemed to break something open inside her, and suddenly she was sobbing, great heaving cries that shook her entire body. Marcus moved to comfort her, but she waved him away, stepping closer to me instead. I'm so sorry, Mom. I let them convince me you weren't good enough, but you're the best person I know. You sacrificed everything for me, and I repaid you by being ashamed of you. How did I become someone so horrible? Several guests wiped their own eyes as they witnessed the raw emotion of our reunion. Even some of Eleanor's supporters seemed moved by Layla's genuine remorse. You're not horrible, sweetheart, I said, reaching out to touch her face the way I had when she was little. You're human. You made mistakes, but you can still fix them. I don't know how. I don't even know who I am anymore. I look in the mirror and see someone I don't recognize. Marcus approached cautiously, his expression troubled. Layla, maybe we should continue this conversation privately. But his grandfather intervened again, his voice firm despite his age. No, son. This conversation should have happened months ago. Every person in this room needs to hear what these ladies have to say to each other. Eleanor shot her father-in-law a venomous look, but he ignored her completely, his attention focused on the unfolding family drama. I changed everything about myself to fit into your world. Layla continued, looking at Marcus. I changed how I talked, how I dressed, how I acted. I even changed how I felt about my own mother. But I don't like who I became." Marcus looked genuinely confused. "I never asked you to change anything." "You didn't have to ask. Your mother made it clear from the beginning that I wasn't suitable as I was, that my background was embarrassing, that my mother was an embarrassment." All eyes turned to Eleanor, whose face had gone from red to white. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. "Is that true, Eleanor?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying a new edge. "Did you tell Layla her mother wasn't welcome at our wedding? I simply suggested that certain social expectations needed to be considered. Answer the question. Did you tell my wife to exclude her mother from our wedding?" The room waited for Eleanor's response, but her silence was answer enough. Marcus's expression darkened as he processed the implications of his mother's manipulation. "Mrs. Miller," he said, turning to me with formal politeness, "I owe you an apology. I had no idea what was happening behind the scenes. If I had known, you would have what?" Eleanor finally found her voice. "Embarrassed our family in front of everyone we know?" "I would have insisted that Layla's mother be given the honor she deserves," Marcus replied firmly. "A mother who raised such an incredible woman single-handedly deserves respect, not exclusion." His words seemed to surprise even him, as if he was discovering his own values through the conversation. Layla looked at her new husband with what might have been renewed appreciation. "I think," said Marcus's grandfather slowly, "that it's time for everyone to reassess what really matters at a wedding. The point isn't to impress your neighbors or maintain social status. The point is to celebrate love and family, all of it imperfections included." Security guards had appeared at the room's entrance, presumably summoned by Eleanor, but they hesitated at the threshold, uncertain whether their intervention was still needed or wanted. "I think I should go," I said quietly, gathering my photographs. "I've said what I came to say, and I don't want to cause any more disruption to your special day." But as I turned toward the exit, Layla's voice stopped me. "Mom, wait. Please don't leave. Not again." I paused at Layla's words, my back still turned to the room full of wedding guests. The weight of 26 years of motherhood pressed down on my shoulders, along with the pain of the past few months of rejection. But underneath it all, I heard the little girl who used to call my name during nightmares. "Please turn around, Mom. I need to say something else." I faced my daughter, who had wiped most of the tears from her cheeks, but couldn't hide the redness around her eyes. She looked vulnerable in her expensive wedding dress, more like the child I remembered than the sophisticated woman she'd tried to become. "I don't just owe you an apology. I owe you my life. Everything good about me came from watching you work and sacrifice and never give up, even when things seemed impossible. I forgot that for a while, but I remember now." She walked closer, her hand reaching out tentatively as if asking permission to touch me. "I want you to stay for the reception. I want you to have dinner with us and dance with me and be part of this celebration. I want everyone here to know that you're my mother, and I'm proud of that fact." The room remained silent except for the soft sounds of people breathing and shifting in their formal clothes. I could see Eleanor's face contorted with displeasure, but I could also see Marcus nodding encouragingly at his new wife. "Are you sure?" I asked quietly. "Because once I stay, there's no taking it back. Everyone will know exactly where you came from and who raised you." "Good. They should know. They should know that my mother worked her fingers to the bone to give me opportunities she never had. They should know that every lesson in kindness and strength I learned came from watching you handle whatever life threw at us." Marcus stepped forward, extending his hand to me in a gesture of formal introduction. "Mrs. Miller, I'm Marcus Whitmore,
and I'm honored to meet the woman who raised the incredible person I just married. Would you please join us for dinner as our guest of honor?" The formality of his invitation seemed to settle something in the room's atmosphere. Several guests began applauding, starting with Marcus's grandfather and spreading through the crowd despite Eleanor's obvious mortification. "I'd be honored," I replied, accepting his handshake. "But I should probably find a ladies' room first and repair some of this damage to my makeup." Layla laughed, a sound I hadn't heard in months. "Come with me. We'll fix both of our faces and then come back to party."
As we walked toward the restroom together, I heard the conversations resume behind us guests, discussing what they'd just witnessed. Some voices expressed disapproval, but more seemed supportive of the reunion they'd observed. In the ladies' room mirror, Layla and I stood side by side, repairing our appearances, just as we had countless times throughout her childhood before school events or special occasions. "I missed this," she said quietly, dabbing concealer under her eyes. "I missed having you to talk to about everything. Marcus is wonderful, but he's not you. Marriage changes relationships, sweetheart. It's supposed to, but it shouldn't erase them completely. I know that now. I lost myself trying to become someone else, and I almost lost you too. I don't want to live like that anymore." We worked in comfortable silence for several minutes, mother and daughter preparing to face the world together once again. The reception continued with a different energy after our public reconciliation. I found myself seated at a table with Marcus's more progressive relatives, people who seemed genuinely interested in hearing stories about Layla's childhood and my experiences as a single mother. During dinner, Layla stood up to make a toast, something unplanned that caused Eleanor to look nervous about what might be said. "I want to thank everyone for sharing this special day with Marcus and me, but I have a particular thanks for someone who almost wasn't here tonight." She raised her champagne glass toward me, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom. "My mother, Charlotte Miller, taught me everything important I know about love, loyalty, and determination. She worked multiple jobs to pay for my education, celebrated every small victory as if it were earth-shattering, and never once made me feel like her sacrifices were a burden. I'm sorry it took me so long to remember that those lessons are worth more than any social status or family connection." The applause that followed was warm and sustained, with Marcus's grandfather leading the ovation from his wheelchair. Even some of Eleanor's friends seemed moved by Layla's words. When the dancing began, Marcus made a point of asking me for the second dance right after his obligatory first dance with his new wife. As we moved awkwardly around the dance floor, he spoke quietly near my ear. "I want you to know that I never supported excluding you from the wedding. I didn't know it was happening until today." "I believe you," I replied. "But you might want to pay attention to how your family treats people they consider beneath them. It says a lot about their character." He nodded seriously, glancing toward his mother, who was holding court with a diminished group of supporters near the bar. "I'm beginning to see that. Layla's been different these past few months, more anxious and less like herself. I thought it was wedding stress, but now I understand it was something else entirely." "She loves you," I said simply. "She was trying to become someone she thought you'd be proud of. Make sure she knows you fell in love with who she really is, not who she thought she should be." Our dance ended with Marcus promising to bring Layla by for dinner the following week, something that hadn't happened in months. Later, as the evening wound down and guests began departing, I helped Layla bustle her dress train for easier movement. It was such a familiar gesture, helping her with clothing adjustments, that it felt like no time had passed since she was small. "Mom, I have something to ask you, and I want you to know you can say no." "What is it, honey?" "Marcus and I talked, and we want to have another ceremony. A small one, just family and close friends, where you can walk me down the aisle and be the mother of the bride you should have been today." The offer touched something deep in my chest, a wound I hadn't realized was still bleeding. "You don't have to do that, Layla. We're okay now." "But I want to. I want pictures of us together on my wedding day. I want memories that include you from the beginning, not just from the dramatic intervention." I looked at my daughter, beautiful in her wedding dress, but more beautiful in her sincerity, and felt 26 years of love and pride wash over me like a warm tide. "If that's what you really want, then yes, I'd be honored to walk you down the aisle." 3 weeks later, I stood in my small apartment getting ready for my daughter's second wedding ceremony. This time, I'd been included in every planning detail from the flower selection to the menu choices. The event would be held in the community center where Layla had celebrated her Sweet 16, a venue that held happy memories for both of us. The past weeks had been a process of rebuilding trust and communication. Layla came for dinner twice without Marcus, so we could talk through months of accumulated hurt and misunderstanding. She told me about the pressure she'd felt to transform herself, the constant suggestions that her background wasn't suitable for Marcus's social circle. I learned that Eleanor had orchestrated most of the exclusion, convincing Layla that including me would embarrass the family and potentially harm Marcus's career prospects. My daughter had believed these manipulations because she loved Marcus and wanted their marriage to succeed. Marcus, for his part, had confronted his mother about her behavior and established new boundaries about family interference. Eleanor was invited to the second ceremony, but warned that any disrespectful behavior toward me or Layla would result in her removal from their lives entirely. The second wedding was everything the first should have been: intimate and warm, focused on love rather than status. I walked Layla down the aisle in the community center's small chapel, both of us crying happy tears as Marcus waited at the altar with a smile that reached his eyes. Mrs. Peterson attended as my guest, along with several neighbors and co-workers who had supported me through the difficult months. Layla's college roommate served as maid of honor, and Marcus's grandfather rolled his wheelchair to the front row, where he could see everything clearly. During the reception held in the same room where we'd celebrated Layla's childhood milestones, I gave the mother of the bride speech I'd always dreamed of making. I told stories about my daughter's compassion, determination, and strength qualities that had nothing to do with social status and everything to do with character. The evening ended with Layla and me dancing to the same song we'd danced to at her high school graduation party, both of us laughing as we tried to remember the steps. Marcus cut in halfway through, but not before whispering, "Thank you," in my ear, for giving him back the woman he'd fallen in love with. As guests began departing, Layla pulled me aside for a private moment. "Mom, I learned something important through all of this. I learned that you can't build a happy life on a foundation of shame and denial. I was trying so hard to be someone else that I forgot why Marcus fell in love with me in the first place." "And why was that?" I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. "Because I was genuine and kind and determined to make something of myself. All qualities I learned from watching you. I almost threw away the best parts of myself trying to impress people who didn't deserve my respect." I hugged my daughter, inhaling the familiar scent of her perfume mixed with the flowers in her hair. "The most important lesson I can teach you is this: never let anyone convince you that you're not good enough as you are. You can grow and improve and learn new things, but don't let anyone make you ashamed of where you came from or who raised you." As I drove home that night, I reflected on how much had changed in just 3 weeks. The pain of exclusion had transformed into a deeper understanding of my worth and my daughter's character. We'd both learned lessons about love, loyalty, and the importance of staying true to yourself even when others pressure you to change. Sometimes the most difficult challenges reveal the strongest bonds. Sometimes standing up for yourself requires risking everything you think you want for everything you know you need. And sometimes love means fighting for your place in someone's life, even when they're too confused to recognize your value. What would you have done
if your own child tried to exclude you from the most important day of their life? Have you ever had to choose between fitting in and staying true to yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video if my story resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life stories about family love and finding the strength to stand up for what matters most. Share this with anyone who needs to remember that true family doesn't abandon you for social status. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that your worth isn't determined by other people's approval. May you always have the courage to claim your rightful place in the lives of those you love.